Okay, so we've had 6 prime ministers in 10 years, and every one of them has promised to fix Britain.
And I want to help try and build
a better Britain.
And that work begins now.
And every day thereafter, with hope.
I am determined to deliver.
Our work is urgent, and we begin it today.
Andy Burnham is number 7. Except the difference with Burnham is that he says he's got the proof he can do it. A city he already turned around, and he calls it
Manchesterism.
The plan is simple. Take what worked in Manchester and apply it to the whole country. Except there's a very big problem with that. For almost a decade, Burnham built his reputation by taking on Westminster.
And my new plea to Westminster, give us the powers to free ourselves.
Fighting for more powers, challenging ministers, and blaming the system when it got in his way. Well, now he's the one responsible for that very system, and that's a very different job. Greater Manchester has around 3 million people and a budget of £3 billion. Britain has nearly 70 million and spends over 1.4 trillion. That's the difference between running a corner shop and being handed Tesco. So can Manchesterism really scale from a city to a country? And can Burnham even make it work now he's the very thing he spent a decade fighting? But before we get into it, if you enjoy this type of content and the channel, then please do consider subscribing. Right now, just 2% of you are. So at that rate, I'll probably hit 1 million around the time Britain manages to actually keep a prime minister for the full term. Now, what even is Manchesterism?
It is business-friendly socialism.
Business-friendly socialism, which is a bit like saying affordable London flat. You know, those are words you don't usually hear together, but if you strip away the slogan, the idea is actually quite straightforward.
Manchesterism then seeks to roll back the 1980s and take more local public control over the essential drivers of the economy.
So instead of Whitehall making all the big decisions, Burnham is suggesting that we give more power to cities and regions to run the things that people rely on every day. And that's the pitch, and Burnham has a mantra for it, one he repeats so often that it's basically a catchphrase.
And the operating principle underneath all of this is place first, not party first.
A new politics based on the exact opposite of the Westminster approach. Place first, not party first.
And what that actually means is decisions get made for the good of Manchester, not for whichever party happens to be in charge. Basically, more control over housing, transport, and public services, which all sounds lovely, right? But those are just principles, they're not policies, and a country isn't run on a slogan. So if we push the political waffle aside, which I think we can all agree on, we're pretty tired of at this point, the question we have to ask is, if Manchesterism is going to be the blueprint for Britain, what did it actually produce in Manchester? And in reality, mostly one thing. One policy where Burnham stopped talking about taking things back into public control and actually did it. And I might go as far as saying that this is the reason he's the Prime Minister.
Buses.
Buses back under public control.
Yes, I have to mention the buses.
And to give him credit, this is probably the strongest case for his entire argument. But to see why they matter, you've got to see how broken they were in the first place. So let me take you back to 1986, the year the government deregulated buses everywhere in Britain besides London.
Towns in the south have become battlefields. For the moment, passengers are enjoying the new competition for custom, but could they become the ultimate casualties of the south's bus wars?
And the pitch was simple. Let private companies compete, and that competition would then hand us cheaper fares and a better service. But according to Burnham, this is where our problems began.
It was the 4 horsemen of Britain's apocalypse: deregulation, privatisation, austerity, and Brexit.
Deregulation is horseman number 1, and the buses were trampled on first.
It's now 4 years since bus services outside London were deregulated, but according to a report today, it's led to 16% fewer people using services. In the Thames.
Outside of London, fares increased, routes were cut, and passengers just stopped riding them. I actually went and pulled the journey figures all the way back to 1986, and the picture is damning. So this graph shows that in the big English cities, including Greater Manchester, bus journeys dropped 62%, while in London, the one place that kept control, they did the opposite. And this is the whole argument for Manchesterism in one chart. Leave buses to private companies, and they cut the routes that don't make money and raise fares on the ones that do, so people stop using them, keep them under public control, and the whole thing is being run with people in mind and not just profit. So in 2017, after years of Burnham hounding Westminster, the government passed a law letting city mayors take the buses back. In September 2023, the buses were rebranded under the B network, and by January 2025, the whole thing was franchised. But did it work? Well, the £2 cap cut the average fare by almost 20%, and in the first areas back under control, journeys jumped 14% in a single year. So people genuinely came back to the buses, and punctuality also improved, going from around 66% to as high as 86.5%. But most importantly, the people of Manchester genuinely loved it, and Burnham actually delivered on something he promised, and for a politician that's about as rare as an honest expense claim. But now we have to be skeptical about something, because this isn't nationalisation. Greater Manchester doesn't own the buses, private companies do, and they run them for profit. The council sets the routes, the fares and the standards, so it's control without ownership. And achieving this wasn't cheap. All in, franchising cost £134 million to set up. What really changed, though, was who carries the risk. Under the old system, if a route lost money, that was the company's problem. Now it's the public's. Greater Manchester took the risk off private operators and put it onto the taxpayer. And that's the thing to remember, because when you scale this up to a whole country, that risk gets very, very big. But what's great is that this model, taking back control of the buses, is spreading. Liverpool's on track to do it by 2027, as well as West Yorkshire and South Yorkshire. So this is Manchesterism actually working. A real problem, a real fix, and a result that we can measure. Which is exactly why the next bit matters. Because if the buses are the great success story, what happened to everything else? Just a quick one first, this video is sponsored by no one. I do have a website though, depositscout.com. It's a free UK savings comparison site with pretty much every UK account on it, and you can filter by type, easy access, notice, regular savers, ISAs, the lot. I built it because the big banks are paying poor interest on savings and basically betting that their customers won't shop around. So it's designed to help you find the best possible rate. You can set up email alerts, so we'll tell you when a new market leading rate appears, and also send you a weekly summary, and that can be for whatever account type that you're after. We also have a savings plan builder, which is hooked up to every account in the UK, so it will tell you which could be the most suitable for your plan and budget. There are even rate history graphs, so you can see how often a provider moves their advertised rate. Take this Moneybox Cash ISA. It's currently at 4%, which is historically about as low as it goes, and they tend to nudge it up every few weeks. So if I were opening one right now, I'd probably hold off and check back in a few days because it'll probably climb. So that's depositscout.com. There's a ton of features for you to try, and if you'd like to support the channel, do check it out. It's linked below. Ultimately, I just hope it helps you earn a bit more interest on your money. Now, the great thing about growth figures is that they're impossible to argue with. An economy either grew or it didn't. And by that measure, Burnham's Manchester has a conflicting story.
Our annual average growth of 3.1% over the last decade, double the UK rate, has taken the Greater Manchester economy to over the 100 billion mark.
But his pitch to the country isn't just good growth, it's good growth in every postcode. And that's where it gets a lot harder. Because in the regions of Manchester, the growth didn't reach every postcode. The centre raced ahead, but if you travelled just a few miles out, the people there barely felt it. An Oxford economics study reported that in the centre, incomes grew at twice the national rate, while in the outer boroughs, so places like Salford and Trafford, they were up just 0.4% a year. And that's the warning for the whole country. If the growth didn't even spread across Greater Manchester, a population of 3 million people in a decade to do so, what happens when Burnham tries to spread it across 70 million? Now, to be fair, he knows that this will be a challenge. His answer was something called the cluster map, 5 zones across Greater Manchester earmarked for new industries, with the flagship being Atom Valley in Rochdale, where he promised over 20,000 high-value jobs. And that, right there, is the model that he needs to try to replicate right across Britain, which might sound great, except they actually only broke ground in Atom Valley back in November 2025. So even in Manchester, this fix to help try and solve the income disparity across like central regions and outer boroughs, this fix that they promised isn't actually a result yet, and we can't even treat it as a test case. And underneath all of this, in Manchester, child poverty has risen in 9 of 10 of his boroughs since 2014. That's more than a third of children in Greater Manchester growing up poor. And worse, 7 in 10 of those children are in working households. And if we go further to the people that aren't just poor in their homes but don't even have one, so rough sleepers, we do have to give Burnham credit because he tried harder here than most. He set up a scheme called A Bed Every Night and even put in 15% of his own salary. Again, that's quite remarkable for a politician, and it did work. From 268 people counted sleeping rough in 2017 down to 89 by 2021. but then it reversed. By autumn last year, it was back to 197. Now, Burnham's reasoning for this was that the things driving people onto the street weren't his fault.
Why are there tents scattered around the city centre when your policy is a bed every night?
The task that we have faced has not been made any easier by the actions of the Home Office in recent times. You know, let's freeze local housing allowance. What I've seen in my role when those decisions are taken, it just builds the number of families who present as homeless.
You're saying that the Labour government is contributing to homelessness.
So we have a man, Andy Burnham, who couldn't stop rough sleeping rising in his own city and who spent years blaming Westminster for it, which is what made his first act as Prime Minister so surprising.
I will soon go through that door behind me and issue my first instruction to end rough sleeping in our country.
Except this time, there's no one above him to blame. The benefit rates, the evictions, the asylum system, those Westminster levers are his now. And the excuses that worked when he was a mayor don't work when you're the one pulling them. Which brings us to the real test. Not whether Manchesterism fixed Manchester, but whether Burnham can take it national. And to do this, he was never going to just run the system he inherited.
I am going to give Britain the circuit breaker it needs.
His whole pitch is that the machine itself is broken and he's going to be the one to rewire it.
Day one for the new PM in his new number 10 North.
So number 10 North will be, in his words,
it will be the situation room for growth where we all get around the table, mayors with all of the team and the Whitehall department, so we get those decisions made more quickly.
But that's just moving an office. The real test is going to be money. So he announced that England's mayors will start keeping a slice of the tax raised in their own areas. Business rates from next spring, and for the first time, a share of income tax. And I think there's genuinely a strong argument for this. Britain is one of the most centralised countries in the developed world. We collect less than 6% of our taxes locally, which is the lowest in the G7. Almost every pound of tax is flowing through London first, so Burnham could be onto something. Perhaps over-centralisation is the real problem, and devolving power back to the regions, the core idea behind Manchesterism, is the fix. Except there's a major flaw to this idea. Letting each area keep its own tax only works if areas are roughly equal. And they're obviously not. In London, disposable incomes run at around £35,000 a head, in the northeast, 20,000, and at the most extreme, nearly £80,000 a head in Westminster against 16,000 in the poorest areas. That's 5 times less. So if every area just keeps the income tax it generates, then the rich keep a fortune, the poor keep almost nothing, and the gap between them will just become permanent. But that doesn't mean this can't work. We just have to adopt a similar system to a country like Germany, where they shift billions a year from their richer regions to the poorer ones. So every area has roughly the same money per person for schools, hospitals, and for buses. Except there's a deep irony here. To move money from rich areas to poor ones requires a government to administer control, which is basically just handing Westminster back the very power that he wants to take away.
This debate is rapidly coming down to an issue of where power in Britain lies and whether Whitehall is prepared to let go.
Well, it turns out Whitehall can't let go because his own plan will need someone at the centre holding the purse, and that is the opposite of everything Manchesterism stands for. Burnham has an answer to this as well. He calls it an integrated settlement.
You know, we have an integrated settlement now, which is a sort of consolidated single budget that comes from Whitehall. Everything should go through that. Then you've got the opportunity to streamline the state at a local level, and you get the most impactful use of public money.
Whitehall still collects the money, hands each region one consolidated pot, and then stops micromanaging how it's spent. And fine, that's tidier, I guess, but someone in Westminster still decides how big each pot will be, so the fight over who gets what won't disappear. And can you see the pattern emerging? The moment Manchesterism leaves Manchester, it just turns on itself. Every time Burnham tries to solve one problem, he creates a bigger one. It's like playing whack-a-mole with the country. Devolve the tax and you widen the wealth gap. Fix that and you hand more power back to the very centre you were trying to escape. And even if he's able to solve all of this and all the other problems he's claiming to be able to fix, he'll still run into the very thing no Prime Minister has ever beaten.
Bond markets.
Bond markets.
Bond markets.
Two words that have quietly ended more political careers than any scandal, and they could kill Manchesterism before it's even started. So when a government wants to spend more than it raises in tax, which is basically always, it has to borrow. It sells bonds to investors, like banks, pension funds, other governments, and they get to decide what interest rate to charge. And that is the most important number a prime minister deals with. And the people who said it don't care about his mandate, his slogans, or how northern he is. They care about one thing: getting paid. Now think about what Manchesterism actually costs. The buses are the best case study we've got, the one thing he genuinely delivered, but he's not stopping there. Now imagine scaling water, energy, housing, and ending rough sleeping as well, all across a country of 69 million in an economy that's basically running on fumes. Well, there's only one way to pay for all of that. He has to borrow through the bond markets. And this is especially fatal for Burnham because his whole plan is to borrow to build. And Britain has a terrible record of building anything without the cost exploding. Exhibit A, HS2.
It is running 7 years behind schedule and £22 billion over budget.
It was meant to run from London to Birmingham to Manchester, and it was budgeted at £55.7 billion. Well, by 2023, costs had spiralled so badly that the government cancelled the entire north half.
I am cancelling the rest of the HS2 project.
And what's worse, the bit that was left, London to Birmingham, is now predicted to cost over £100 billion. So double the price for half the railway. And here's the bit of history that really stings. Manchester built the world's first intercity passenger railway in 1830. That's 200 years ago, from scratch with Victorian shovels. Modern Britain can't even build half of one for £100 billion. Now imagine Burnham trying to borrow hundreds of billions to build everything. And that's the gamble he'll have to take. Because when you borrow that kind of money, you're not just betting that you can deliver, you're asking the markets to bet on it as well. And the moment they stop believing you can pay them back, they charge you more to borrow. Or worse, stop lending altogether. And that can bring a government down in days. Except Burnham isn't Truss. She was cutting taxes and hoping for the best, like jumping off a cliff and hoping you'll fly. And Manchesterism would be different. He would borrow to build, with real assets at the end. So the whole plan of Manchesterism, saving Britain, lives or dies on whether the markets will lend to him. And that's the problem, because the man asking has already said a few things that made them nervous.
So we do find ourselves stuck in a rut and in hock to the bond markets.
That word hock, I didn't really know what it meant until I saw this clip, but that might just be underselling it, because on his very first day in number 10, he made some comments about spending that, at least at the time, I didn't think were very reckless. He basically said that he would stick to the fiscal rules, use any flexibility within them, and take no risks with the economy. I think we can all agree that sounds pretty sensible, except the markets didn't see it that way. Borrowing costs went up, the media pounced, and within a day, Burnham's swagger was gone. The man who talked about breaking free from the bond markets was suddenly very keen to reassure them.
Are you going to be honest with the public that you can't do those things you're promising without either more borrowing or raising taxes?
Bus cap we're announcing today and the removal of VAT off electricity bills are all fully funded. People will say, well, how? I've reprioritised.
Fully funded. Reprioritizing. That's not the language of a man taking on the system, it's the language of a man being careful not to spook it, which tells you exactly how little room he's got. And that's what should worry Burnham the most, because if being sensible gets you slapped, imagine trying to pay for business-friendly socialism. So with all this in mind, can Manchesterism actually save Britain? Well, definitely not like this. Burnham hasn't got the money, and he hasn't got the time to do everything it promises.
Now, you might be asking yourself as you sit there thinking, well, how has Greater Manchester managed to get itself to this point? It goes way back before me, because people in our city region have been working at this for decades. The main foundation is the creation of a different political culture, the polar opposite of the Whitehall and Westminster way.
He's talking about Manchester's political culture, one that took decades of graft to build. So the secret ingredient of Manchesterism was never a policy or a bus. It was a culture. And to develop a new culture, you need two things that Burnham just doesn't have: time and trust. And the trust gap is real. Remember that nobody actually voted for him to be Prime Minister. He was handed the job mid-term, and his own party even tried to block him from returning to Parliament. Yes, according to the polls, he's popular at the moment, but popularity fades, and a poll isn't a mandate. So he's asking the country to sign up for a long-term journey that he doesn't have a mandate for. But what he can do is fix one thing completely and visibly, the way he fixed the buses. And not another fare cap, it needs to be something monumental, like sorting the water companies. That'll convince the bond markets, it'll convince the public, and suddenly he might just have the time and the trust to do the rest. So the real question was never, can Manchesterism save Britain? It's whether we, the public, will give him long enough to find out. I think he's onto something, but if we don't have the patience to give him the time that Manchesterism requires, then we're just going to be right back in a couple of years watching the 8th Prime Minister walk up Downing Street.